Namaskar and welcome to In Focus. In this last episode of a 2.5-year series, my guest today is the gentleman they consider the architect of the BJP's electoral victory, the strongman of the government, Home Minister Lal Krishna Advani. Mr. Advani, later in this interview, I want to talk to you about ideas that you may have for making our system of governance in India more effective. But first, let's just reflect a little on the almost 6 months that your government has been in office. This is really the BJP's first time in office, and although it is a coalition government, most people look upon it as the BJP government. Are you happy with the way things have gone?
You're right when you said that even though it's a coalition, it is supposed to be a BJP government. And I think it is this statement which has to be borne in mind while assessing how this government has fared. And if you keep this statement in mind, then I would say that the government has performed reasonably well. I would not call it spectacular, except in with reference to a couple of achievements, but otherwise it has performed reasonably well. When I refer to specifically a couple of achievements, I have in mind Pokhran and Kaveri, which are really major breakthroughs and major achievements for the government.
Do you also have opposites in mind, things that you think really shouldn't have happened, that went wrong and you now regret?
There's nothing to regret, but two factors should be borne in mind when you take cognizance of any criticism of this government. Those two factors are, number one, what you have already said, that it is not a BJP government, it is a coalition. And number two, the arithmetic of the 12th Lok Sabha. Even if it had been a single party government, or even suppose the BJP strength had been preponderant, say around 220 or 230, and the fact that it would have nevertheless been a coalition comprised of parties which may not wholeheartedly agree with all that the BJP thinks is right, there would have been problem if the majority had been on the verge, just somehow to make 272 or 273. So that it is the arithmetic of the 12th Lok Sabha which has to be borne in mind.
Okay, let me put something to you. For many people who believe in the BJP, this was not just a new government, it was the dawn of a new India. With your hand on your heart, is that really happening?
It's like before the dawn breaks actually, the early rays that are still visible. And it is therefore that in spite of the criticism that many even of our supporters voice, they still expect a lot from this government. And therefore, what you say is an assessment which has not been discarded by the mass of the people.
You're saying there's room still for hope?
Ample.
Okay. For many people, I want to explore this in a sense with you. For many people, the image they have of the government is today unfortunately colored by its projection in the press. It's a sort of tutu meme between the allies that comes to their mind first of all. Can you accept that this image has affected the credibility of the government?
Two things you have used, two words that you have used, I would say the credibility of the government is still intact, though the image has been affected.
How much?
This is how I would put it.
How much has the image been affected?
It has not been affected as much as to affect its credibility. And therefore the hope is there. If the credibility had been affected, then it would have been a real matter of worry. It has not been affected, either of the leadership or of the government as a whole.
Many people say that one of the problems the government has faced is possibly that the BJP has been perhaps a little bit too accommodating, perhaps a little bit too tolerant, and that had you been more assertive, more tough in your attitude, many of this wouldn't have happened?
I don't agree with that assessment. And after all, just 2 years back, see what was the situation and what is the situation today. If the
No, I mean specifically
BJP
handling
has been accommodative, it is because of this attitude of accommodativeness that our adversaries, who in '96 succeeded in building a government on an anti-BJP plank, have not succeeded in doing so now, and still do not see success in the future.
But I was specifically talking about, have you been too accommodating of your allies today?
I don't think so. I don't think so. It's too accommodative. In fact, I have already replied to this question when I mentioned that the arithmetic of the Lok Sabha makes it imperative for the leader of the coalition to be accommodative.
Let me put it a little bluntly. Could the problem with the AIDMK have been handled differently?
One can always think of very many alternatives, but in the given situation, I think by and large the government's response has been appropriate.
Has the government occasionally been taken for a ride by Jayalalitha? Has she taken advantage
Not
of your
at all.
accommodation?
After all, anyone can see that here is a government which has a certain view in respect of how Article 356 has been abused over the last few decades. And from the very beginning we said that we are not in favor of abrogating Article 356 as many of our adversaries who today criticize us for many things have been. We are not. But at the same time, we are strictly in favor of not abusing this article. And you would recall that in your last interview with me, it was this particular stand that I took, that the government would rather than abuse Article 356.
And it brought her wrath upon you the next morning. Do you not therefore feel that this problem needs to be tackled once and for all, that this constant toing and froing between Delhi and Chennai?
All that I would stress is that no one can accuse this government of accommodating an ally to the point in which their own principles get violated.
Okay,
And this is a very specific example.
I grant that you've actually stood by your principles, but you did say, Advani Sahab, that the image has suffered. How now do we put that image right? What steps can you take that people now say this tutu meme has stopped?
By continuing to do right. Even in the same context of Tamil Nadu, what has happened in the last 3 days has made people comment that it is a political move, when it is not at all a political
You're
move.
talking about your letter to Murusuri
Yes,
Maran.
that's right. I saw that it had been an error. It was a question of caption of chapters. So I said it should not have come in the list of chapter relating to suspects.
You were simply correcting an inadvertent error.
That's right.
You weren't creating room for a future ally to replace the AIADMK.
Not at all. That's not. There is no politics in this at all.
Okay, that's very clear. Do you think that this tutu meme is going to end, or do you see it continuing for a while?
I think that everyone has become reconciled to the ground realities of the situation.
Think or hope?
I think so.
Okay, then let me bring up another image that people are concerned about. This time it's not to do with the allies, it's to do with the BJP itself. There have been a spate of newspaper and magazine articles that say that perhaps the BJP party is not supporting the Vajpayee government as fully as it might. The magazines have alleged that senior leaders of the party, sometimes perhaps unnamed cabinet ministers, have to quote, stood as bystanders whilst the BJP government has had to contend with a boxing match with its allies.
Not at all. It's absolutely, I don't see even an iota of substance in these reports. The party as a whole, including the present leadership of the party, including all the ministers in the government, have been playing their role as is expected from them.
It's also been alleged, because you can put this right for us, that only 2 office bearers visit Mr. Vajpayee. that 3 general secretaries are said to dislike him. Actually, the article uses the word loathe him, and that the 5 chief ministers don't get on with him.
It's just one magazine which has been writing consistently this kind of stuff, and that doesn't make it correct.
Let me widen it. Is there a sense in which perhaps because the party hasn't fulfilled expectations as quickly as the party may have hoped, that there's a sense of disillusionment or disappointment in the BJP cadres with the government's performance?
I've just come from a major party conclave, and I could see the kind of satisfaction and confidence that was there. So much so that they themselves, when 1 or 2 of the backbenchers suggested that we say something or incorporate something in the political resolution about our allies or about Chennai, there was immediate disapproval from the entire party.
So the party, workers, officials are
Absolutely.
solidly with the government.
Absolutely.
This is just
solidly.
journalistic speculation.
I haven't seen anything except in one magazine.
Okay,
And when it comes consistently over a period of time, then one begins to doubt how honest is that assessment.
There's been speculation of your own relationship with Mr. Vajpayee. Let me ask you honestly, have differences come between the two of you?
This isn't the first time that writings of this nature have been seen in the press.
Except now that you're Home Minister, he's Prime Minister, it's more critical.
Not at all. Not at all. It's been a perfect relationship over years, over decades rather.
And still is.
Still is. And will always be.
Do you consult each other informally outside cabinet meetings? Do you rely on each other's advice?
Almost daily.
He takes your advice, you take his.
When anything strikes me, I ring him up or see him, meet him. And similarly, he also phones me very often.
So once again, this speculation that there is a rift between you is make-believe.
It's absurd.
What about what's called your 2 darbars, your respective circle of supporters? One of the most respected journalists in the country claims that your darbars are at war with each other. He says that this has stymied the functioning of the government.
It would be correct if Karan Thapar is also included in my darbar, because it always happens that some people have, I meet more often, that's always, it's not unusual.
But there's no
darbar as such.
And there's no proxy war between
Not
you
at
and
all.
Mr. Vajpayee being fought out by your darbar.
Not at all.
Then is this government being picked upon?
That is true. That is true. There are many in the country, many outside also, who may not be happy with this government.
Do you face a hostile press in your opinion?
It is somewhat hostile.
Is the image and impression that I've discussed of a bickering tutu meme with the allies, of incipient rifts within the party, is this all a creation of the press?
You have put two queries about which, so far as the exchanges between us and some allies, that is true. But so far as incipient revolt within the party or party differing from the government, no base whatsoever.
Then are you worried that if this press campaign or hostility is not corrected, what may be an exaggerated version could come to be believed by the country as the truth, doing damage to the government and the party?
I don't think so. If the governance is proper and if the government continues to behave correctly, I don't think this will have any effect.
Mr. Advani, I want to pick up on that in part 2, but first let's take a quick commercial break. Don't go away. We'll be back in just a moment to continue this conversation with the Home Minister of India. Welcome back. We're talking to the Home Minister of India, Lal Krishna Advani. On the international front, the Americans have just undertaken an interesting departure in handling terrorism with their strikes in Sudan and Afghanistan. As a Home Minister who has to contend with Pakistani terrorism, first in Kashmir, but now also in Himachal Pradesh, do you support their proactive, preemptive strikes?
There is no need for anyone to support such a measure, because I do not know whether the dimensions of this attack were justified. I do not know. After all, an attack on another country is a major decision. It's an attack. It's not like hot pursuit, nothing of that kind. But at the same time, when at Jaipur, the Prime Minister was asked this question, or I was asked this question, our reply was that at least it appears that America has started realizing how dangerous and how menacing and evil cross-border terrorism is.
Let me push that a little further. Do you think the American action creates a precedent, perhaps even provides a justification for India considering doing something similar against Pakistani-based terrorist camps, which are the source of terrorism against us?
There is no question of following precedents set by this kind of superpower who even on for lesser pretenses have acted very often very strongly. But so far as we are concerned, I know that during the last 5 months, whenever any representative of the United States has met me, I have always taken up this issue with them, whether anything else comes up or not.
But you're saying that you're going to continue to be cautious in terms of your response to Pakistani terrorism. This, in your eyes, as Home Minister, is not a precedent for you to do something similar across the border?
Because I am concerned with internal security, and in case of Pakistan, I have always maintained that internal security and external security are intertwined. But a decision that can even lead to more serious consequences is something that the government alone can take.
But let me put something to you. You've been today maybe not supportive, but certainly understanding of why America had to act the way it has. Today, however, the American Undersecretary of State, Thomas Pickering, who used to be an ambassador in this country, has said that whilst America reserves the right for itself to strike anywhere in the world in its self-defense, he specifically warned India against any similar measures against Pakistan.
This is precisely what we said the other day, that America cannot have double standards in these matters. Cross-border terrorism is an evil, it's a menace for the whole civilized world, and if it's a menace for America, it's a menace for India also.
And India reserves the right to respond as it thinks fit.
India always reserves the right to respond as it thinks fit, though what should be the dimension and gravity of the response is something that we alone can judge.
Has Osama bin Laden played any role in the Pakistani-backed terrorism that you have to contend with?
I can't say, but
what about these 3 bases in coasts in southern Afghanistan, which the Americans said? Do you believe that they have been the source of training or the source of infiltration of terrorism into our country?
It is true. In fact, only the other day, after this Chamba incident, the Chief Minister of Himachal Pradesh told me that villagers in that region who cited these militants noted their ability to mount a running horse, which struck them as maybe they are Afghans.
So you think that in fact the one consequence that's possible of the American strikes is that there might be a diminution in some of the terrorism, some of the infiltration across the border that we face?
Could be.
We could be an unintended beneficiary of it.
Unintended beneficiary, maybe. Though it all depends upon how Pakistan is affected by this directly.
Okay, let me move to something else. You're widely thought to be the person who is the ideological core of the BJP. How do you react to the fact that the President of India has said that the Nehruvian vision is essential to the future of India?
Frankly, I don't see anything wrong in this statement by itself.
No,
though one may not agree with it totally, but there is nothing objectionable in that statement. I would say that Nehru's contribution to parliamentary democracy is perhaps immense, enormous.
I remember you once saying to me, Advani Sahab, that there, in the old Congress party, there were two strands of secularism, one which you said was identified with Nehru, the other with people like Patel, Pant, Sitaramaiah, Tandon. And you said that the BJP's secularism was much closer to the second strand. Now that the President of India has said that the Nehruvian vision is essential to the future, isn't there a real sense in which the President and the government are at odds with each other?
Not at all. He was not speaking in a particular context. And I remember the entire 59-day journey that I undertook last year, which was 50th anniversary of independence, Swarna Jayanti Rath Yatra. I was particular to see that I paid homage and tributes to everyone who contributed in his own way to getting India freedom, whether it was Savarkar or whether it was Pandit Nehru.
So you see no problem in the fact that
Not
in
at all.
voicing a political opinion, he's identified his office with certain political positions.
His positions are known that way. Though when he says that Nehru's vision is necessary for the country, in itself there is hardly any, I don't dispute it that way.
Not as a generality, it's only in the details.
In the details, everyone has his option, everyone has his choice. Gandhi's vision was different from that of Nehru.
Okay, so you see nothing wrong in the nature of the president's political expressions?
Not at all.
Finally, looking at the 6 months that you've been in power, and given in particular the vicissitudes of the parliamentary system you have to contend with, the fragility of the parliamentary executive, do you personally think that a presidential system would respond better to the character of India and to the needs of our country?
Government at the moment is actively considering setting up of a commission. We have...
but that's the government. What about
yes.
L K Advani, the person? Can you share your personal thinking?
At the moment, when you are asking me all these questions, I am replying to them as Home Minister without being untrue to myself. And therefore, I would say that now that the government is actively considering setting up of a commission to have a second look at the Constitution, it would not be proper for me to be expressing personal opinions on these matters.
Because it would prejudice the commission?
It would certainly affect it. It may not prejudice it, but it would affect it.
It could also, I suppose, put you in the middle of a controversy you don't want to get into.
No, no. To that extent, the moment I said that a commission on the Constitution would be appointed, I've had so many comments made on it.
Okay, to end this matter, you say actively considering setting up a commission. When will it be set up?
I think it may not be long. It would be very soon. Maybe in the month of September itself.
And it will start functioning shortly thereafter?
That's right.
And are you going to give it a time limit by when it has to report?
Yes, that would be there.
So how much time will you give it?
It would be, there is, the basics are all ready. It's a matter of going to the cabinet and the government approving of it.
And the commission will then report back within a year?
That's right.
I mean, a limited period like a year?
It would be a limited period.
And any type of review of the Constitution would be open for consideration. There's no subject that you're barring.
Except that we would say that the basic structure of the Constitution is not to be affected.
And how do you identify that?
That has been identified by a series of court judgments. They have said that democracy is a basic structure, but not parliamentary democracy or this system of democracy.
Just
not
democracy per se.
That's right.
Mr. Advani, on that note, thank you very much for talking so openly to In Focus. That's it for this week, and with this interview, 2.5 years of In Focus comes to an end. If you have been watching, thank you very much indeed. Goodbye, good night.